Chapter 116 Gotham in Progress, Part 2. Gotham City's sewers have a long history, and no matter which city renovation project it has undergone, it has basically never been affected. This is Gotham's darkest underground kingdom. Basically, no Gotham citizen would wander around here for no reason. If the sewers of Marvel New York might have some strange evil scientists and good neighbors, then the Gotham sewers at this time were practically dead. Even homeless people and beggars wouldn't come down here because they had heard the legend that everyone who appeared in the sewers would disappear without a trace. But Catwoman was skilled and daring, able to squeeze into any nook or cranny. To avoid Bruce's gaze, she quickly slipped into the sewer. Catwoman was indeed exceptionally gifted in this regard. She hadn't gone far before she discovered signs of human activity near the reservoir on the east side. She was initially just curious, so she followed the clues and kept searching. But soon, her next discovery exceeded her expectations. Catwoman found a huge conference room in the sewers. Even though Catwoman was being reckless, she knew this was a serious matter, so she quickly called Bruce. Upon receiving the news, Falcone, Bruce, and Schiller arrived together. The three stood in the enormous conference room. Bruce looked up at the dome draped with ribbons and said, "This isn't something some gangsters or thugs could build. Indeed, the ceiling here is over 10 meters high, and the entire conference room utilizes a massive stone support structure. Putting aside the ingenuity of this architectural design, the sheer scale of the project alone would require more than 1 or 2 people to complete." Falcone stood at the very front of the enormous conference table, somewhat silent. The old Godfather's gaze slid down the table to the far end, landing on Schiller, who was deep in thought. He asked, "You don't seem surprised." "You are the same," Schiller said. The three remained silent for a while before Bruce finally broke the silence, saying, "It seems we've all guessed that there's a mysterious force secretly manipulating Gotham, and this is the evidence. We have all paid a heavy price for this." It was Falcone who said, "I know you haven't stopped questioning your parents' deaths, and neither have I." The old Godfather closed his eyes, seemingly lost in thought again. He said, "My eldest son died in a similarly bizarre shooting, also many years ago, but I chose to remain silent until today." "You think these people are the murderers?" Bruce tapped the table, then looked at Schiller and said, "Professor, you have no reason to investigate this matter, and you called out the killer's name when you faced him that day. You'd better not be so dogmatic. Then what do you think I'm doing tracking down serial killers all over the world?" Schiller said. Bruce frowned and said, "You knew about the secrets of this organization all along? Not only that, I know more, but I cannot reveal it. And even if you knew, it probably wouldn't change anything." "What's its name?" Falcone asked. "The Court of Owls. Their killers are called Claws." That nursery rhyme. Bruce suddenly remembered that a strange and terrifying nursery rhyme had always been circulating in Gotham City. "Beware the Court of Owls, always watching your every move, lurking in the shadows of Gotham City, hiding in low walls and attics, in your home, in your bed, never mention his name, for his claws will come for your head." Falcone fell silent and did not press the matter further. Bruce wanted to ask more, but Schiller interrupted him, saying, "What we need to think about now is why this organization suddenly withdrew from here. It doesn't seem like a good sign." Schiller was genuinely puzzled. How could the Court of Owls have vanished overnight? In all these comics, he had never seen a Court of Owls escape from Gotham. Judging from the appearance of this conference room, it seemed to have been used not long ago. How could they all disappear in an instant? Bruce Moss, stroking his chin, said, "Maybe they just moved their base? Then why did they suddenly want to move their base?" Bruce and Falcone both shook their heads. From the perspective of the three of them, this behavior was indeed strange. Nothing major had happened in Gotham recently, so why was this organization in such a hurry to move? Moreover, this conference room is indeed very well hidden. If they hadn't moved in such a hurry and left traces, even if all the buildings on the surface of Gotham were rebuilt, this underground base would probably never have been discovered. With such a huge investment and such exquisite construction, how could they just abandon it like that? What happened that they don't know about? But now we have confirmed that such an organization does exist, and Gotham's current state is not an accident," Falcone said. "We must unite," Schiller said, tapping the table. "Regardless of what you think, I must warn you that this organization is far more terrifying than you imagine. It not only manipulates Gotham, but also wants to manipulate the entire world in the same way. If we cannot muster the strength to fight it, then Gotham and the entire world will be shrouded in the darkness of the Owl's wings." "I will make them pay the price," Falcone said. I have been waiting for this day for too long. My silence does not mean I have forgotten about it. I have been waiting for them to leave a trace, and today, I have finally waited for it. It looks like we all have a grudge against the Court of Owls, Bruce said, arms crossed. He couldn't be 100% certain that his parents' deaths were related to this mysterious organization, but he was absolutely certain that if this dark organization was manipulating Gotham and turning it into what it is today, then they must also be one of the culprits who killed his parents. Bruce stood on one side of the long table, while Falcone and Schiller stood at opposite ends. The only light in the dark conference room was the slowly flickering candlelight. Finally, Falcone said, "To avenge them, I am willing to form an alliance with you. But this alliance must be secretive enough that any member joining must be vetted by the others, and we have only one goal," Bruce continued. "Break down all the mysterious forces that try to manipulate Gotham, to bring a new order to the city," Schiller said. The three men, now back on the surface, said nothing. This covenant had no written document, not even a single clear provision, but all three knew that this secret meeting beneath Gotham would determine the city's future. Soon, Detective Gordon and Lawyer Harvey, whose character, abilities, and beliefs were all trustworthy, also joined the covenant, and the first version of the Gotham meeting was born. This is an organization even more mysterious than the Court of Owls. It has no goals, no action plan, and no one even uses any identity within the organization to communicate. They only maintain superficial social identities and only develop a slightly more tacit understanding than usual when doing certain things. This organization has only one ultimate goal. If Gotham was born chaotic, then let it remain chaotic and free forever. Anyone who tries to manipulate it will ultimately fail, and Gotham will always be Gotham. After confirming the Court of Owls' movements, Schiller set aside his concerns and began preparing for Gotham City's first major redevelopment. His first task was to come up with a perfect urban planning scheme for Gotham City. Of course, Schiller himself didn't have this knowledge, but that didn't matter. He had a rather useful cheat code. Stark. Use your genius brain to think of a solution. In the Stark Tower lab in Marvel, New York, Schiller hands Stark a box of blueprints. Stark is puzzled. After looking at 2 pages, he says, "What is this? City planning maps? Why are you giving this to me? I need a perfect urban planning scheme for this city. You'd better get it done quickly. I need it urgently." Stark glanced at the blueprints, then at him. The two stared at each other, and Stark said, "Why do you think I'm good at urban planning? You may not know how, but you can learn. You'll have to learn eventually anyway. So why not today? Even if you can't learn, Jarvis can. He's a super AI. Planning a city should be a piece of cake for him, right?" Stark opened his mouth, a curse almost escaping his lips. But then he glanced down at the blueprints and said, "You're planning to let me handle the urban planning of such a megacity all by myself?" "All right," Schiller said. "Actually, there's a super genius who's about your level and has already come up with the first version of the plan. But because, his supercomputer doesn't have enough computing power, so I can only come to you to borrow some technical support." Stark didn't hear a word of what else was said. He only heard the phrase, "a super genius similar to you." Just as he was about to retort, Schiller threw another set of blueprints at him. Stark stared at them with wide eyes, half believing and half doubting, and then froze. "Wait a minute." Stark bent down and pulled out some documents from the box, then began comparing them on the spot. As he looked, he took out more blueprints. He said, "Is this some kind of exam question? This city doesn't even exist in the world. You made it up. What's the point? The point is to see who is more talented between the two of you. I'll say it again. There is absolutely no one in this world smarter than Stark." Stark held up one finger and said, "If you think there is such a person, you must be mistaken. I'll prove it to you right now." As he spoke, he also began to write and draw on the map with a pen. He said, "Okay, I admit he's a genius. His understanding of the logistics system is unique and seems perfect. But it's certainly not the best. I have a better idea. Look here, this central rotating disk is the problem. You all must think this disk is very important. When it comes to this kind of issue, Stark becomes very serious and extremely methodical. He said, "This guy you're talking about, I admit he's very strong. It seems like he's not even using computer tools, but doing manual calculations, and he's almost reached the limits of human capability. But he lacked creativity. Like I said, his vision was a bit outdated. Cities don't necessarily have to be two-dimensional. They can also be three-dimensional. Vertical city, that's right, a vertical city. I know this concept has been proposed for many years, but no city has successfully implemented it. But assuming that the city you're giving me really exists in this world, then a vertical city would definitely be the most perfect solution. Stark's tone was quite decisive. He said, "Look at the structure of this city. Look here. This is the beginning. What's this place called? Living Hell? How could anyone name a neighborhood like that? Never mind, that's not important. What's important is that their spontaneously formed ecosystem is almost indistinguishable from the concept of a three-dimensional city. This is actually part of the standard answer. This model is very suitable for the current situation of this city, especially since it also has a port. Look at this person's plan. He uses a central turntable as the main hub, which is the right idea, but as I said, he lacks creativity. The central turntable doesn't have to be a circle. It could be a sphere. Let's shift our focus away from the 2D plane that's outdated and rigid. Now Stark will show you what true genius is." Chapter 117 Gotham in Progress, Part 2. As Stark narrates, a model of a future city gradually emerges in Schiller's mind. Just like Stark said, this is indeed a good fit for Gotham. The main problem in Gotham right now is that no matter how much the logistics system is modified, it will always be in a state of extreme saturation, meaning that there is no redundancy left for unexpected situations. Don't forget, the future Gotham stage is full of unexpected events, with all sorts of villains taking turns to appear, and natural and man-made disasters following one after another. If an accident causes the city to be paralyzed for half a day, then it's better not to develop at all, as everyone will be exhausted from patching things up every day. But now, Stark has proposed a groundbreaking concept of a three-dimensional city. Calling it a three-dimensional city isn't quite accurate. It's more like a completely new honeycomb city, where each cell is an independent structure with its own independent ecosystem, much like a living hell. To achieve this, simply building one structure after another on a flat surface is insufficient, as the space cannot be fully utilized. Therefore, it is necessary to create a three-dimensional structure. Roads don't have to be right on the ground. They can also wind through the city. Parking lots and parks can be built in mid-air, and apartments and residences can be stacked vertically. This concept has actually been proposed before, but as Stark said, Gotham is a perfect testing ground because, due to some historical developments, many areas of Gotham have spontaneously formed this pattern, such as the Living Hell. Indeed, Living Hell is a slum, extremely dirty and chaotic, but that doesn't mean it's not part of a vertical city. Living Hell has already achieved the key characteristics that Stark mentioned: regional independence, extremely high space utilization, and an independent urban ecosystem. This means that once the issues of water and electricity supply and living environment are resolved, a small section of the honeycomb will be completed. The same applies to other areas of Gotham. By modifying them piece by piece, one honeycomb after another is completed. All that's needed is to assemble these cells and then connect them with a citywide transportation system, and Gotham City will become a true three-dimensional city. This is Gotham's unique advantage. For other cities to achieve this structure, they would almost have to demolish and rebuild the entire city. Bruce's proposed publishing plan was actually quite ahead of its time. In his plan, he designed a modern city that was almost perfect, from the urban ecosystem to the logistics system. The only problem was that to achieve this effect, it was basically equivalent to tearing down and rebuilding Gotham. The manpower, resources, and costs required are astronomical. Even Wayne Group would find it difficult to afford the reconstruction of such a megacity. Moreover, rebuilding would require the resettlement of a large number of people, which is precisely what gives Bruce and Falcone a headache. You can't just say that if you want to demolish the houses, everyone should live on the street, right? To resettle these people, new houses need to be built, which would double all construction costs and time costs. Therefore, they felt that this plan could only be used as a last resort and hoped that Schiller could provide a better suggestion. Stark truly deserves the title of a genius cursed by knowledge. Perhaps it's not a matter of knowledge, but rather that compared to Batman, he is more imaginative and creative. Vertical cities, even in Marvel's era, have never been successfully realized by any city. Perhaps some cities have this attribute naturally due to their terrain, but in reality, none of them have been fully realized. They may only have taken shape in a small part of the area. However, if this plan were applied to Gotham, it would indeed achieve the effect of low reconstruction costs, less time investment, and a large amount of traffic redundancy. Soon, Stark, brimming with enthusiasm, used Jarvis's computing power to come up with a detailed plan, which was divided into 3 versions and 6 modification plans. Then, he proudly put his hands on his hips and said, "Now who is the most powerful genius in the world? Of course, it's Stark. Indeed, Bruce replied after seeing the plan. Your friend is indeed a genius. Although he didn't understand why the symbiote in his mind made a series of terrified gurgling sounds and then hid after seeing the words, Bruce was still very satisfied. Is he interested in developing his career in Gotham? Wayne Enterprises will offer him a very good compensation package, Bruce asked. That's probably difficult. He's not short of money and has a very high opinion of himself. He probably won't be employed by anyone. It's a common ailment of geniuses, Bruce said, but he didn't think it was a big deal. There are plenty of geniuses in the world, and not all of them can work for him. Besides, given Gotham's reputation, basically no one with a screw loose would come here. After showing the proposal to the architectural planning experts they had hired at great expense, everyone was amazed. In this day and age, without the help of computers, most urban planning schemes do not provide many details. Confirmation is usually only made after the actual construction has begun. However, thanks to Jarvis, a groundbreaking super AI, Stark's solution was more detailed than Lego's assembly instructions, specifying almost every detail, from the height of each wall to the load-bearing capacity of each pillar and the laying method of each wire. Simply put, if you take this information and build it step by step, you'll get a brand new Gotham City as easily as assembling building blocks. Moreover, because the modifications are relatively minor, mostly involving additions, there is no need for large-scale relocation and resettlement of personnel. At most, there will be small-scale relocations during the renovation of the original buildings, which is entirely within the acceptable range for Falcone and Wayne Group. Schiller offered them a suggestion. You can't get fat in one bite, there's no need to start with the most difficult part, you can just find the simplest place to modify anyway. If something goes wrong, it won't get any worse. Yes, this place is a living hell. The living conditions here are truly indescribable. Bruce and Falcone have both been here, and they agree with Schiller's point of view. No matter how much this hellhole is improved, it can't get any worse than it is now. Therefore, the first phase of Gotham City's transformation plan was piloted in Living Hell. Of course, hell is inhabited, and there are many of them. They heard that the place is going to be redeveloped. They don't want to, but they have no choice. If it were just the Wayne Corporation, it would be fine, but there's also the Falcone family, who are the leaders of all the gangs in Gotham. They can't resist them at all. They heard that there is compensation, and they are already planning to take the money and move out and never come back. But to their surprise, the renovation was not a grand demolition and reconstruction, but more like patching and repairing. First, a construction team composed of gang families hired a large number of people to clean the place inside and out. It turns out that the living hell has no garbage disposal facilities. Most of the garbage is thrown out of the windows, which has turned the place into a huge garbage dump. Just cleaning up the garbage took hundreds of people and several days. Immediately afterwards, the Water Conservancy engineering team arrived and began a comprehensive renovation of the water pipes. According to Stark's design, the water supply facilities for the vertical city will not only include full access to tap water, but also solar water heaters and water purification devices. Schiller skipped the water heater step entirely. Gotham people don't care that much. It's only 1987. If they want hot water, can't they just heat it up themselves? However, a water purification system is indeed necessary. This is where Bruce comes in. He sets up a regional water purification pump, buried underground in each Hive City module, to purify and filter the region's circulating water, and also to facilitate the filtration of boiling water before it is discharged into the sea. Batman's actions are naturally extraordinary. The power of this water purification device is more than enough to meet the needs of domestic water recycling, and it's also very environmentally friendly. Next, water pipes were laid to connect to the tap water supply. The entire living hell has more than 2,800 water points. After completion, water supply to almost every household was achieved, and there was no longer a need to use public wells or water pumps. Next came the installation of the power system, which Bruce himself designed. Gotham City has plenty of electricity, but its utilization rate is low. All the haphazardly strung power lines and antennas in the living hell were removed. Stark had already calculated the optimal power line design with the help of Jarvis, and Batman further adapted it for local use upon landing. After the power lines were laid, not a single power line could be seen in the entire city, but the power utilization rate was extremely high, and there was no power outage all day long. Next are the gas and heating issues, and the solutions are basically the same. In addition, the passageways inside the living hell have been refined. The original dozens of intestinal passageways have been integrated with the architecture, widened and connected, so that all the corridors and rooms are connected by the shortest routes without altering the main structure of the building. Based on Stark's design, Bruce also designed a separate tunnel elevator suitable for the living hell. The elevator tunnels were designed as a grid, and the transport cabins could be transported from the residential corridors to the nearest living areas via the elevator tunnels. In addition, the entire area has been equipped with essential environmental facilities for a three-dimensional city, such as a police station branch, an emergency hospital, a rooftop park, ecological forests on building rooftops, sports facilities and alleyways, and a rooftop soccer field. Because this was a joint effort by several major factions in Gotham, the manpower and resources used far exceeded the needs, and the efficiency and speed were extremely high. Most importantly, under the threat of force, the wishes of the residents could be disregarded, and no resident came forward to express any different opinions or oppose the transformation. With the full force of an entire city mobilized to transform it, the living hell was almost quickly transformed into a complete honeycomb module. The final step is to renovate the exterior, including installing more than 6,000 lights with sufficient power, re-insulating the building's exterior walls, designing window security measures, adding balconies, and beautifying the building's facade. Inside the building, all the corridors were renovated, unreasonable apartment layouts were redesigned, and all the shops in the living area were rebuilt and converted into modern stores. In addition, firefighting equipment was installed, including reserving fire lanes, installing firefighting equipment, and installing fire sprinklers. The last thing to be completed was the landscaping. Although there was no green space on the ground in the entire hell area, the greening on rooftops of varying heights, the greening in alleys, the greening on balconies, etc., still managed to bring the green area up to the standard. So when the residents of the living hell who had been relocated moved back, they found themselves living in a place that seemed familiar yet completely different. This is a modern, even futuristic, three-dimensional honeycomb city. It is dense but not crowded, well-connected but not chaotic. It may seem to lack some things, but in fact, it is well-equipped. It seems that everything is in the wrong place, yet it is very convenient. More importantly, in addition to its practical functions, its aesthetics have also reached their peak. A steel forest rises from the ground, metal handrails become branches, and countless lights become leaves. Amidst the dancing points of light, the vitality growing in the cold steel skeleton perfectly matches this crazy city. People move about, light and shadow intertwine, and warmth and coldness overlap, making the city seem even larger and human beings even smaller. It was only 1987, an era when most cities were still just skyscrapers and highways. This cyberpunk-style city would be cutting edge even in the 21st century, and it would be awe-inspiring today. Moreover, this is not just to improve the quality of life for citizens. More importantly, the two overpasses running through this modular city center have tripled the transportation capacity of the entire street. Many truck drivers are now bypassing the surface road next to the street and taking the overpass instead, which has instantly boosted the area's transportation capacity. Moreover, if an accident occurs on one road, a sign will light up at the entrance, allowing drivers to choose another route. This provides considerable redundancy for logistics transportation. Chapter 118. Tonight, the stars shine bright. The morning sun shone brightly in New York, and the highways were bustling with traffic. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Stark Tower as Schiller took a sip of his steaming cup of coffee. Stark was organizing data at the lab bench across from him. After a while, he pulled out a sheet from a pile of documents, shook it and said, "Well, I have to admit, this friend of yours is quite capable. Is he interested in working for Stark Industries? I'll give him a salary that will satisfy him." "That's probably difficult, especially since he's still in college." "What does it matter? Peter is in high school too, isn't he? By the way, which university is he in? Harvard? MIT? Or maybe Princeton? That's not important. What's important is whether this technology will be helpful to you." Stark, holding one of the design drawings, said, "Liquid bioengineering is indeed a good idea, but it's mostly limited by materials science. Our basic materials haven't developed to that level yet. The gel you gave me is strange. It feels somewhat familiar. You don't need to know the principle behind it, just know that it works." "But what I need to study is the principle," Stark said. "You can't just conjure up some weird material out of thin air and then expect me to use it with my eyes closed. This is a bit of a problem, you know? We're not doing charity work. Everyone needs to support their families." Stark stretched out his hands and said, Okay, I understand. Let him name his price. You don't need to beat around the bush with me. Just give me a price." Schiller put down his coffee cup, turned his chair around and said to Stark, "The problem is he doesn't want money. But he's very rich. What does he want? He needs a technology, but don't get me wrong, not your kind of mecha technology. He needs a satellite navigation technology that can be widely used by civilians, and more importantly, civilian communication equipment that can support this technology. Stark, with one hand on his hip and the other on the lab table, said with some doubt, "Civilian communication equipment? That's a bit strange. In my opinion, well, I said I admit he's a genius. With his skill level, he shouldn't be unable to even make something for civilian use. Is it really that hard to make a portable GPS?" He also requested more features, including a display system that is as intuitive as possible, an input-output system, an interactive interface, communication functions, and some leisure and entertainment functions. "Isn't that a cell phone?" Stark pulled out his cell phone, though it was still the old-fashioned button phone. "Go even further than that. Unleash your genius and imagination to envision the pinnacle of what a mobile device can achieve. What does he need this for? A cell phone is only for making calls. Isn't that enough? He can install a navigation system on it, but as for games and entertainment, can't he just use a computer? Just tell me if you can do it or not." Stark opened his mouth, but then changed the subject, saying, "Of course I can do it. What can stump a genius like Stark?" Then he snapped his fingers and said, "Give me a detailed list of product requirements, and then I'll come up with a solution for you. Then give me all the information on the liquid culture medium and raw materials. Make a deal." 20 minutes later, Stark looked at Schiller, who was still writing furiously, and began to feel a little uneasy. But he had to pretend to be confident and could only crane his neck to see what Schiller was still writing. It was just a requirement for a mobile phone. How could it take him so long to write? After a while, he couldn't hold back any longer and tapped the table with his finger, saying, "You don't expect me to invent a spaceship, do you? What kind of mobile phone function would allow you to write here for 20 minutes? No, this is only a small part." Schiller put down his pen and handed the papers to Stark. Stark looked at them and said doubtfully, "Phone, full-screen display, octa-core processor, portable charging, open-source system, UI interface. Are you sure this is a cell phone? Isn't this just a miniature computer? Now is the time to test your genius. You are to condense almost all the functions of a computer into a handheld mobile phone, and not only do you have to ensure that the functions work perfectly, but you also have to make the display and appearance smooth and beautiful." Stark covered his forehead and said, "That's a bit too much. I don't think the information you gave me is enough to make up for it. Make him produce something more substantial. Don't try to raise the price. I know you just lack a strategy. With your technical skills, you can definitely do this. Can't you just let him work at Stark Industries? I'm even willing to share my lab with him. We can develop these things together." Stark paused for a moment, then said somewhat hesitantly, "Okay, I'm just telling you this. But you absolutely mustn't tell anyone that your friend has the ability to stand shoulder to shoulder with the great Stark. Of course, he's always a little bit less than me, but only a little bit. I think we can be good friends, especially in research. We'd have a lot to talk about. So, can't I really meet him?" Schiller sensed the urgency in Stark's tone and understood Stark's feelings. If Stark had to find a close friend, someone who was his equal in intelligence and a worthy opponent, who else could it be but Batman? While Schiller could indeed transport creatures between two worlds, the risk was far too high, especially for the two main characters. Therefore, he had no choice but to reluctantly travel between these two worlds to engage in some reselling activities. Although there is a generational gap between Gotham and New York, DC is still in the 1980s while New York has entered the 21st century. Batman and Iron Man each have their own strengths and can complement each other in certain aspects. Batman excels in all aspects, from various individual soldier equipment to base construction and strategic planning. He is highly proficient in all of them. Stark, on the other hand, has reached an unprecedented level in mechanics, and he is adept at any invention related to machinery. Bruce is good at being results-oriented. Once he has a clear goal, his research and development speed is extremely fast, and the completion rate of the results is no less than 200%. For example, the liquid colony technology that Schiller brought to Stark this time was the result of his research on venom. He extracted a gel substance from venom. This active gel can be completely controlled by bioelectricity, and the entire research and development process took less than a month. Stark's strengths lie in his boundless imagination and creativity. He excels at solving problems using various cutting-edge methods, and coupled with his advantage of the times, he can bring more advanced methods and technologies than those of the last century. What else is there to say? Let's go. After receiving another negative answer from Schiller, Stark was indeed somewhat disappointed. He desperately needed a partner with whom he could share common interests. Obadiah is still in a coma. Peter is too young and died suddenly. Pepper can provide him with emotional comfort but knows nothing about scientific research. Schiller can give him life advice but can only fix light bulbs, and Stark finally met someone who might have common ground with him in his professional field. But the other party unilaterally refused to communicate, so it's no wonder he was very disappointed. If given the opportunity, Schiller wouldn't mind building a bridge of communication between Bruce and Stark, but the biggest problem is that time flows differently in the two worlds, so even remote communication is impossible. However, Stark quickly regained his composure because Schiller assured him that the collaboration would be long-term and that the two sides could engage in long-term technology exchanges. Being able to continuously witness the research achievements of another genius filled Stark with enthusiasm for research and development. He said, "Just watch. Although I admit that the other side is also very strong, they will never be more talented than Stark. I will prove it to you." After saying that, he shook the piece of paper Schiller had written on in his hand and said, "Start with this. Now all you need to do is go back and tell him that he had better produce more geniuses, or I will make him be amazed and ashamed of himself." Unfortunately, Schiller thought that Batman's personality was different from Iron Man's. He wouldn't fall for that kind of reverse psychology. If Schiller had told Batman, "There's someone more talented than you," Batman would probably have just nodded in agreement. He definitely wouldn't have jumped up like Stark, as if his pants were on fire, and immediately tried to prove that he was stronger. If both sides had Stark's personality, Schiller would be overjoyed. He could then relay messages between the two sides, provoking one side and then the other, directly initiating an arms race between DC and Marvel. The two super geniuses began to compete with each other, until they swept up the technological level of the entire world to the point that Thanos was heartbroken and Barbados wept. Considering the potential of these two individuals, this is not impossible. Soon, at the Gotham University Research Institute, Victor, holding a stack of documents, said, "His use of energy is very interesting. I think he has given me some inspiration. This way of energy conversion can indeed be used in weapons." Victor twirled his pen and said to Schiller, "Wait a minute. I'll get you a design drawing. Where is it?" "Oh, here. I did intend to develop a cryogenic weapon, but I've been too busy lately and haven't had time to start the project yet. Look at this, I call it a freeze gun. What do you think? Can freeze a person into an ice block, but keep the person's body alive. It can be used to subdue an opponent without harming him. I think it would be great in some police and civilian applications. This was originally intended for medical use. It's an extension of my cryogenic chamber technology. The reason I turned it into a weapon is because current weapons are too lethal. I am a pacifist, you know. If there is a weapon that can completely subdue the opponent without harming them, then subduing the enemy in war is much more likely than killing them." On the other side, Stark, after seeing the cryogenic technology data, said, "Interesting, is this another friend of yours? His low-temperature technology is indeed very advanced, but I think it should be applied more to the ecological field, such as large-scale weather generation devices, and it can also solve environmental problems such as glacier melting. Of course, this technology needs to be approached with caution, as it is quite lethal. A freeze gun? His idea isn't bad, but the design is terrible. It's too inefficient, only firing one shot at a time, and it runs out of power. Jarvis, help me analyze how to utilize this freezing energy more efficiently, and make a sample later." Back in Gotham, Victor looked at Stark's blueprints and said, "This weapon does look pretty good. Does your friend know anything about medical technology? I still have a few difficulties in that area that I haven't overcome. For example, how to ensure that the body's immune system and self-healing abilities function properly at low temperatures, where cell activity is reduced." Schiller snapped his fingers and said, "I have a friend who is very good at this kind of technology, especially in terms of self-healing abilities." "That's wonderful." Victor seemed very happy. He said, "Although I know that the body's self-healing ability cannot completely solve the problem of nervous system atrophy, once the self-healing ability and immune system regain activity, the patient's physical condition will be better during subsequent treatments." He paced back and forth in the room with some excitement, then said, "I need this technology, and I can trade it for more cryogenic technology. I've also considered the large-scale weather generator you mentioned." The scene shifts back to the Stark Tower laboratory, where Connors looks at some documents and says, "I must say, this document is very timely. It solved a major problem for me. The problem with the lizard serum is that it is too active, which causes people to exhibit lizard-like characteristics in addition to their self-healing abilities. turning them into destructive monsters. Perhaps, using cryogenic technology can indeed maintain the activity of serum within a just right range, allowing it to exhibit self-healing abilities without becoming overly active. Connors picked up a syringe, with Peter helping him. Connors thought for a moment and said, "We still need to rely on Stark's technology. We need to build a special cryogenic chamber to store the serum, or rather... That's it. I have an idea. We should start with cell activity." Connors was very excited, saying, "Highly active self-healing ability and low-temperature storage technology are a match made in heaven. We can use cryogenic technology to screen cells with different activities, and even achieve... Oh, right. That brain-stimulating drug you gave me last time, we can use that too. We can use cryogenic technology to eliminate the negative effects. Let me think. Those blockheads in the military will never figure this out. They only want stronger drugs. They don't understand that sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward." Connors waved one arm, made some gesturing for a speech, and then said, "If this technology really achieves a breakthrough, I'm confident I'll get a Nobel Prize nomination this year. A great invention that will improve the lives of all disabled people is on its way." Schiller applauded him. He might soon have 2 Nobel Prize-winning friends, albeit in different worlds. The combination of cryogenics and self-healing technology may produce even greater miracles, Connors speculated, stroking his chin. "We may have touched the threshold of longevity, even immortality. Cryotherapy is used to maintain the original appearance, while self-healing technology may be used to reverse aging, maintain and enhance cell activity." Soon, he began writing and drawing on the documents, clearly having a lot of inspiration. Peter looked at the document and said thoughtfully, "Actually, I've thought about this before, Doctor. Do you remember when Pikachu broke the refrigerator last time? I think that although our refrigerators are already very good, they still have shortcomings, such as the temperature control system being too fragile and the emissions being not environmentally friendly. If these low-temperature technologies could be applied to civilian use, yes, I've looked into it. I think this technology for food preservation might be more advanced than the principles currently used in refrigerators. I firmly believe that the broader market lies in civilian applications." Peter started writing as he spoke, saying, "I saw a very advanced refrigerator at Mr. Stark's place before, but Jarvis said it was very expensive. But I think if we use this technology, the cost could be greatly reduced, and it would definitely be particularly suitable for large refrigeration units. Moreover, this technology is stable, so it might be good for installing in cars too." Not long after, Roy excitedly opened the door to the Gotham University office, stepped forward, and shook Victor's hand gratefully, saying, "That large refrigeration unit is amazing. It can be used not only in warehouses but also on trucks and even small vehicles, and it doesn't consume much energy. Transportation companies all over the East Coast are scrambling to hire us, and all the factories in Gotham City capable of assembling US are operating at full capacity. Yet we still can't keep up with demand. Now even the West Coast has heard about it. I think our financial statements will soon show impressive growth again." In the Stark Tower lab, Ethan said to Schiller, "I've tried my best, but the new elevators and scaffolding you requested are really absurd. I don't understand why these things need to be bulletproof. Who would be a porter in the middle of a battlefield?" He plugged the USB drive into the computer, then pointed it out to Schiller, saying, "I reinforced all the important joint parts with materials, but as you know, the final effect depends on the strength of the materials. Stark Labs doesn't have enough vibranium, so I could only make a relatively small model. You can take it to your friend to see. If he has the money to buy vibranium on a large scale, then I think the strength shouldn't be a problem." Schiller looked at the model he was carrying. To be honest, he couldn't see anything special about it on the surface, so he said, "Could I borrow this model for a moment? I might need to take it to a professional for analysis." Ethan said, "No problem at all. I'm not planning to put it up for tender anyway. Nobody's going to spend that much money to make this tool so sturdy. What's the point? If it breaks, just replace it." Schiller found it difficult to explain to him how Gotham could consume tens of thousands of elevators and scaffolding in a single week. The city's people were so simple and honest that everything placed on the street became a consumable. Schiller's model was unanimously approved, but Roy raised other questions. "That high-powered traffic light in the city center is nice, but it seems like it can't be mass-produced and it consumes a lot of electricity. Do you have any good ideas?" Soon, Ethan came up with another USB drive and said, "I don't understand. Are you planning to go to the center of the battlefield to direct traffic? And what's even more absurd is that the power you're asking for is a bit too much for a traffic light. Let me warn you, once this thing lights up, it can illuminate at least 7 or 8 streets, and the residents there won't be able to sleep. That's exactly the effect I wanted. Schiller was very satisfied. He said, "Do you have a model? Could you show me one?" "I don't have a model, but I can show you the actual product." Ethan went outside, and after a while he came back pushing a small cart. One of the light bulbs on the cart was almost 3 meters in diameter. Peter came over and exclaimed in surprise, "Is this a traffic light bulb? Who is it for? A giant?" Ethan fiddled with the wires behind him and said, "Cover your eyes. I'm going to turn it on." As soon as the power was turned on, a huge green patch suddenly lit up on one of the walls of Stark Tower. The next day, Pepper angrily threw a newspaper or magazine in front of Stark. It was the New York Globe, with the headline on the front page. "Last night, a strange green light emanated from the top floor of Stark Tower. Is this inhumane war promoter and mad scientist conducting some kind of inhumane radiation experiment again? But these traffic lights are indeed very effective." One night in Gotham, Catwoman returned home, hummed a song as she took a bath, and then admired her beautiful jewels. Just as she was about to go to sleep, she saw an incredibly eerie red light appear outside her window. Instantly, countless terrifying stories flashed through Catwoman's mind. She screamed in fright, dashed to bed, and burrowed under the covers. Then, through the gap in the curtains, she saw a flash of red light outside the window, followed by green, then back to red. Catwoman was so frightened that she couldn't sleep all night. When she met Bruce the next day and learned that it was a newly installed traffic light in the city, Bruce almost got his face scratched by the furious Catwoman. One afternoon in New York, Peter appeared at Matt's hideout. Daredevil warmly welcomed him, and Peter said, Mr. Matt, actually, there's something I'd like to ask you." "What is it? Just tell me." "Well, I need some detailed information about Kingpin, like his industrial layout and such." "Oh," Matt looked at Peter in surprise and said, "It seems you've made great progress and know how to gather intelligence first. Okay, I'll only help you this once. From now on, you'll have to learn to gather intelligence on your own." Peter gave a strange look. Matt, while flipping through the documents for him, said, "I've been fighting with him for so many years. No one of his properties has escaped my notice, especially near the East Coast. You know, New York, Miami, and Chicago are the main targets." "Yes, that's right. I want these 3 cities. Don't bite off more than you can chew, kid. You'd better focus on one city, or even just one neighborhood in a city." Peter looked troubled and said, "Give me these 3 cities first. Even if I don't need them, I can take them back and keep them safe." Soon, the document was placed on the desks of Falcone and all the gang leaders. Falcone was somewhat surprised and said, "How did you come up with such a detailed industrial plan, Professor Rodriguez? It's as if someone has already done it. And this plan does look very reasonable. I think with this, I can definitely convince those people in Miami," Roy said. "Of course it makes perfect sense," Schiller thought. "This is something Kingpin tested over many years with blood and lives. If it didn't make sense, Kingpin's East Coast criminal empire would have collapsed long ago." After Gotham City and Chicago completed their collaborations, Imperial City also got involved, and Miami naturally couldn't sit still. However, compared to the other cities, Miami's foundation was not strong enough, and its style was more conservative. Roy needed a more detailed plan to convince them. Schiller wouldn't have fabricated this plan out of thin air. He had already decided on the model he would draw inspiration from: Kingpin. Kingpin is indeed a bad seed, but you also have to admit that he is a criminal genius. He was able to build a criminal empire from scratch, radiating from the East Coast to the whole country, and this criminal empire has stood firm for many years. Even though he has been harassed by various superheroes, he is still the underground king of the East Coast. What else is there to say? Let's start copying. Moreover, Schiller didn't even need to notify the person being copied when he copied Kingpin's homework, because Kingpin's nemesis, Daredevil Matt, had already thoroughly studied Kingpin, and Kingpin himself might not even have such detailed information on the distribution of his industries. The excuse of borrowing homework from Matt to copy is also very reasonable. Spider-Man has just started out and has already offended Kingpin, so he has no choice but to go down the wrong path. It is normal for Peter to be inexperienced and not know how to gather information. I believe that Matt, as Spider-Man's mentor, would be very happy to help him. Sure enough, this detailed business plan, which included the layout of shops in every street and alley, quickly impressed Miami. Moreover, some gangs in Broodhaven, not far from Gotham, were also getting restless. Although the city is relatively small, the port is in a bad location, and the gangs are basically incompetent. The big bosses at the top can at least share the spoils with them. Schiller then took the business plan to Bruce, who, after reading it, said, "You mean you want me to come up with a way to break this criminal chain? Is this some kind of test? I think the breakthrough point should be here. That's right, this port in Chicago. Judging from its geographical location, it's extremely important. You could say it's the bullseye of the target. If it were me, I would definitely focus on cracking down on the industries here. Once something goes wrong here, the other ports will probably be affected." Peter quickly looked at a battle plan and said, "Do this? Attack the Chicago docks? Is there any special reason for this?" "There's no particular reason behind it, but you have to trust the wisdom of the person who devised this battle plan." A few days later, Matt patted Peter on the shoulder and said, "I really didn't know you were such a strategist. That was a brilliant move. Kingpin's industries in the central part of the East Coast are almost paralyzed, and it will probably take several months to recover. Come on. Tell me, how did you come up with such a brilliant idea?" Meanwhile, Schiller called Roy and said, "Do Chicago a favor and tell them to be careful about their harbor terminal during construction. Don't cluster industries too closely together there, lest they get wiped out and affect our business." A few days later, in the Stark Tower laboratory, Dr. Connors fiddled with the experimental equipment while listening to Schiller tell stories about Victor. "Perhaps we are alike," he said. "We are all working hard for others, and perhaps saving them is also saving ourselves." He stopped what he was doing and said with some emotion, "Or rather, it is precisely this goal of saving others that has saved me countless times. There have been many dangerous thoughts in my life. I know very well that if I wanted to avenge what happened to me, I could probably do a lot of things. But it is precisely because I have felt immense pain because of my own experience that I can empathize so clearly." Under the cold light of the instrument, Dr. Connor's eyes resembled waves of seawater. His cold-blooded genes had not completely faded, and his eyes still had the vertical pupils of a lizard. But now, they held a richness of emotion unlike that of a cold-blooded animal. "If it weren't for saving her, I might have given up everything long ago." In the same laboratory, Victor sat on the floor, leaning against the lab table, one hand stroking the cryogenic chamber where his wife was kept. "The story you told me really shocked me," he said frankly. "I think there are still many people in the world who, like my wife, suffer from this disease. Like your friend's story, a scientist who lost an arm and wanted to cure all the disabled people in the world. I think I have a greater goal now." Victor's voice came through the dim light of the laboratory, and there was always a special emotion in his eyes. He said, "That's a more absurd goal, just like this absurd world. I hope that one day, no one, no wife or husband, will be troubled by this disease anymore." He looked up at the cryogenic chamber and said, "I hope that no one will ever have to look at their loved ones through such heavy doors again, but can instead embrace and kiss them freely. I hope they never have to go through the same tragic story as me," Connor said, his voice beginning to emanate from the quiet laboratory as he ran his one hand over the books on the lab bench. "To thank the world for leaving me with a brilliant mind after taking away a part of my body. It took away my beloved, but at least it left me with wisdom. If I have the ability to do something, then being missing an arm will not stop me from changing the world. If I still have the chance to reunite with her, I hope all families in the world have this kind of luck. If they don't, then I'll give it to them." Schiller, on the other hand, simply stood between the two stories, listening to all their emotional shifts and fluctuations. It was as if two spaces suddenly overlapped. Schiller saw that, in the layers of space, Connors looked up and saw Victor sitting in front of the experimental table. When Victor turned his head, the moment their eyes met, countless points of light shattered, and space and time stood still. Millions of light years away, separated by countless world barriers, their eyes met, piercing through space and time. Two stories, two lives, the same wisdom, the same thoughts, met at this moment. Stark, clad in his armor, stood atop Stark Tower. Schiller lit a cigarette, and Stark, looking down at the lights of New York City, said, "I have never felt so strongly that someone is working to change the world, just like me." "Change the world," Schiller said. "Why are you so sure he's doing the same thing as you, to change the world?" Stark shook his head and said, "It's a resonance between geniuses. You might not be able to tell how much wisdom and effort is contained in those dry and boring numbers. But I can see him in him, his wisdom, his character. It's an exchange between geniuses. What kind of person do you think he will be? He is different from me. He didn't put in that much passion for it, nor did he see these brilliant studies as his life goal. He doesn't care about creativity, he doesn't care about the fun in it. I think he must be a rather melancholic person, but none of that matters. Schiller turned his head and saw Stark's eyes, which were always a little moist, shining brightly in the light of the distant lights. He heard this unique genius say, "We are the same, yet different. This world is so wondrous. It has given two completely different people almost the same wisdom." This was the first time Schiller had heard Stark admit that someone else possessed the same intelligence as him. Whatever our purpose may be, every human being should be proud of the great wisdom he possesses. Stark never seemed to bow his head, only gazing into the distance. The city lights of New York were still bright at night, but in Schiller's eyes, these lights gradually went out, the city dimmed, and the roads began to stretch out. When he returned to Gotham, the rooftop of the Wayne Enterprises building was chilly, like a cold wind. "I firmly believe that no matter what other races exist in the universe, humanity is special," Batman said to Schiller from the rooftop, the gradually brightening lights of Gotham casting a warm glow on his mask. "I also know that wherever that person is making his inventions, he should think the same way I do," Batman said. "I had no idea you would think that someone else shared your thoughts." "Nobody thinks exactly like me," Batman said. "We are all unique," Stark said. "But that's precisely what makes it so wonderful. This is the essence of human wisdom. Wisdom is truly amazing. Isn't it amazing?" In Schiller's vision, the lights of Gotham and New York gradually merged into one. As if at this very moment, these two of the world's top geniuses were standing face to face, unable to see each other, yet seemingly sensing each other's presence. They completed an almost impossible exchange, despite being separated by an immeasurable distance and at completely different times. These geniuses seem to have found a point of convergence in a complex web, and all the light that spreads out from there echoes each other. Different identities, different backgrounds, and different roles exist in their own worlds, yet they seem to be intimately connected and have a tacit understanding. Perhaps this is what makes humanity so great. They are forever connected in spirit and empathy. As night deepened, Batman turned and left, and Stark also departed. In the Gotham University laboratory, Victor drifted off to sleep, while in the Stark Tower laboratory, Connors slowly fell asleep. Time and space constantly bring countless shadows, and then take them away. Finally, only Schiller remained. He stood atop Stark Tower, where New York City was ablaze with starlight tonight. He saw countless stars twinkling at the farthest edge of the night sky. Perhaps one of them was a light shining from another world. The knowledge and wisdom of geniuses resonate with each other, illuminating the beacon of civilization. Schiller stands here now, not as one of those beacons, but like an ordinary person, standing atop a tall building, with the fire that humanity has never extinguished for millennia beneath his feet, and countless lamps rising from the distant other side of the world above him, watching over each other from afar. He thought that from slash-and-burn agriculture to the rise of steam, from the first electric light being lit to countless skyscrapers rising from the ground, humankind has never stopped exploring. Transcending space and time, all wisdom is woven into the tow rope that pulls the giant wheel of humanity forward. Great geniuses wave across the river of time, while pioneers of civilization pay homage across the barriers of space. Schiller thought that if his coming here was destiny, then the ability to connect the two worlds was the best gift the Creator could give him. He brought together those who could not meet, made heroes cherish heroes, connected ideas, and sparked intellectual exchanges. If he had to come here with a purpose, and ultimately accomplish something great, then Schiller hoped, just as he was doing now, to light one lamp of wisdom after another, to unite these lamps into an inextinguishable flame of civilization, to let it burn brightly, and to become an eternal sun in this universe. Then one day, we will witness the great ship called human civilization sailing into the mysterious universe that our ancestors never reached. At that time, the Milky Way will shine brightly across the vast sky, and countless stars will illuminate the night sky. The brilliance of this black sun will be inexhaustible for eternity. Chapter 119 Spiders and Bats, Part 1. In an alley in Queens, New York, Peter was hiding behind a dumpster. Pikachu perched on his shoulder, peeking out with its little head. "Are you sure those monsters you're talking about are here?" he asked. "Of course, I followed them for several days. This is one of their small strongholds." "Okay, so what are you planning to do now?" "I have to eliminate them. Besides this small stronghold, There are two larger strongholds on the two streets next door. Pikachu jumped onto the trash can and stared at Peter. Pikachu said, "Are you sure you can beat them? If it's really like you say, and there are 7 or 8 of them, you won't get the better of them." "Actually, I'm not sure, but I have to do it." Peter shrugged, his spider head hood squinting at the two white eyes, and then said, "I learned from Gwen that the NYPD is hunting these monsters, and many officers have been wounded. Their bullets and tear gas are useless against them. This should be a pretty tough enemy, but I'm determined to take them on by myself. I haven't faced any decent opponent on my own since I started being Spider-Man." "Are you really not going to tell your friends? Aren't you afraid of encountering some danger or trouble that you can't handle?" "No, this time I'm going to do it myself," Peter said firmly. "I'm Spider-Man, not anyone's appendage. If I can't do anything without someone else, what kind of hero am I?" Then Peter reached out and ruffled Pikachu's hair, saying, "You have to keep this a secret from me too." Pikachu waved its hand and flicked its tail, saying, "Don't worry, Detective Pikachu is very tight-lipped. We're best buddies. I'll keep it a secret for you." The next morning, Pikachu was happily devouring a sandwich that was enormous for its size, when Schiller spread a spoonful of jam on the bread and asked, "So what are those monsters? Did you see them?" "No, but Peter said they seem to drink human blood, and that's why the police are chasing them, though it doesn't seem to be going very well." "Blood-sucking? Vampires?" Schiller tried to recall the descriptions of vampires in Marvel Comics, but found he could barely remember anything. The native Earth vampires in Marvel seem to have no distinguishing features, just like most legendary vampires, afraid of silver, garlic, holy water, and crosses. "Do you think that's within Peter's capabilities?" Pikachu swallowed the sandwich in his mouth and said, "With Spider-Man's fists and Detective Pikachu's brains, what enemy can't we defeat? That being said, I think Peter hasn't fully matured yet, and he might need some help." "Help? You'd be that kind?" Pikachu stared at Schiller with his round eyes. Schiller smiled, and Pikachu shivered. He knew that whenever Schiller showed that smile, someone was about to be in trouble. Just then, Steve, who was jogging in the morning, pushed open the door on time and said, "Good morning. I should ask S.H.I.E.L.D. for breakfast reimbursement, since I always eat breakfast here." Schiller didn't mind at all. He pointed to the chair next to him and told Steve to sit down. After all, Western breakfasts are all self-service, with bread heated and coffee brewed by the customer, and Steve couldn't eat much anyway. Unexpectedly, Coulson, dressed in a suit, also came in. He seemed a bit flustered and said, "There's been some trouble in Queens lately, Captain. I have to work overtime. I'll arrange for another agent to take care of your needs. He'll come over this afternoon to hand over the shift. Don't worry, I'm not a baby. Can't I take care of myself?" Steve took a bite of his sandwich and asked somewhat vaguely, "What's going on in Queens? I've noticed the agents have been quite busy lately. Are you dealing with someone?" Coulson pursed his lips, clearly knowing something but unwilling to say it. Schiller said, "Our good neighbor Spider-Man has been going there a lot lately." Coulson paused for a moment, then said, "Spider-Man? What's he doing there?" "I heard he's got his eye on a group of monsters over there and is still investigating. It seems he plans to carry out this operation alone." After Coulson walked out the door, he picked up the walkie-talkie at his waist and said, "Director, good news. Spider-Man plans to take on all the vampires in New York City by himself, and he already has a complete battle plan." "Yes, I know. Of course, they're behind this. Without Spider-Man's friends, how could he dare to do something so big all by himself?" "Indeed, the Hand has been in turmoil lately, and we don't have enough manpower. So I'll bring back those 2 squads from Queens. After all, with Stark and the Captain's help, even if it's just covert help, those vampires will be taught a lesson." That night, Spider-Man, carrying Pikachu, used a web to stick to the wall and swung across quickly. During the swing, he turned around and threw 2 trash bags at the wall. Chasing him from behind was a group of giant bats with glowing red eyes, huge fangs protruding from their mouths, and sharp cries from time to time, making them look extremely terrifying. Spider-Man ran and shouted, "You bunch of flying rats! You think you can catch me? Come on, try!" After saying that, he sped up and jumped onto a tall wall, the swarm of bats whizzing past him. Behind the wall was a garbage dump, where a huge garbage truck was parked. Peter was agile and ran to the back of the truck in a few steps. The garbage piles here were uneven, making it difficult for bats to fly. The group of bats transformed into human form, with pale faces, red eyes, and sharp claws on their hands. Peter and Pikachu crouched down beside the garbage truck. Pikachu said, "Listen, you really need to time your move carefully. If they catch up with us, we'll be outnumbered." "Don't worry. I've never felt so clear-headed before," Spider-Man said. "Dr. Connors is right. People need to use their brains more to become smarter." "Do you think you've become smarter?" "Of course, I have a very clear mind right now. You go to the driver's cab of the garbage truck, and I'll lure them over. Then I'll lead them around in a circle, and when they get close to the back of the truck, soon, the vampires saw Peter standing on top of the garbage truck, waving at them and taunting, 'Hey, you bunch of flying stinky rats. You're nowhere near as good as the rat friends I know. Want me to get you some peanut butter?' There were about a dozen vampires in the group. They weren't originally from New York. They had just been transferred here. When they first arrived, they found that the security was lax, and there weren't even any vampire hunters. So, of course, they ate to their heart's content and even drained 2 young policemen dry. The strange man in the tight-fitting clothes dared to mock the noble vampire race so blatantly, and the leading vampire instantly transformed into a bat and pounced on him. The vampire, transformed into a bat, had a wingspan of about 2 meters and was incredibly powerful when it swooped down from the air, but Peter was not afraid at all. He nimbly rolled to the side and jumped off the garbage truck. The vampires that flew over his head didn't hesitate and pounced on the garbage truck. Then Peter took advantage of his speed. When the bats pounced on the left side of the truck, Peter rolled around to the front of the truck. When they pounced on the right side, Peter pulled them back. Sure enough, after a few rounds, the bats couldn't hold back any longer. They split into 2 groups trying to flank Spider-Man, but this played right into Peter's hands. Several bats circled around from the left, while others surrounded him from the right. Peter quickly rolled to the back of the car, where the bats also gathered. Peter yelled, "Pikachu, attack!" After shouting that, he used a spider silk thread to stick to the garbage mountain and jumped away quickly. Before the bats could react, the back panel of the garbage truck opened, and a mountain of garbage instantly buried everyone. Although these bats were large, there was even more garbage. Moreover, although the bats had wings, they did not have strong limbs to break free. They did not escape the moment the garbage fell and were buried alive on the spot. Peter leaped into the air again, landing on the hood of the car. He high-fived Pikachu, who jumped out of the driver's seat. Peter said, "They should just be small fry. I heard from Gwen that these monsters should be able to use magic." Before Peter could even drag the vampires out of the garbage dump and beat them up, police sirens blared outside the dump, clearly indicating that the police were also keeping an eye on the location and had caught up with them. Peter jumped onto the hood of the car and glanced around. Pikachu said, "We have to go. Now is not a good time to deal with the police. After all, you're dressed no better than those monsters." "I'm doing a good deed," Peter said. However, after hesitating for a moment, he followed Pikachu's plan, used his spider silk to stick to the building next to him, and quickly left. Mid-air, Peter said excitedly, "For some reason, I feel like today's operation went particularly smoothly. Did you see that? Before, when they were trying to surround me, I might have rushed in and knocked down one side first, which would have meant I would actually be surrounded. But today was different. Did you see my cool roll? I gathered them all together in one go. You seem a bit different today. You used to love throwing punches, but today you actually defeated the enemy with your brain. I have to say, that's a big improvement. Congratulations." Peter swung to the roof of a building, put Pikachu down, and sat on the edge of the roof. He was very happy. Peter said, "Now I realize that my friends were right. Only wisdom plus force can defeat them better. There is nothing shameful about using your brain. And don't forget what Detective Pikachu taught you." "What?" "It's reconnaissance and preparation. Without the stakeouts of the first 2 days, would you have been able to figure out their speed and mobility after they transformed into bat form? That wasn't taught to me by you, but by Dr. Schiller. In my opinion, the only thing you taught me is that there are good and bad mice too." Pikachu spun around and lashed Peter's shoulder hard with its tail. Peter yelped in pain, rubbed his shoulder, and said, "What did I say wrong? Aren't you a mouse?" "But they are bats, not mice." Peter pursed his lips, clutched his shoulder, and said, "It's strange, really. Where did these monsters come from? Why can they turn into bats and suck human blood?" Gwen has been extremely worried lately because the 2 police officers who were attacked by vampires are still in critical condition, and she is very afraid that her father will also be attacked in the same way. Peter lowered his arms and looked into the distance, saying, "What's worse is that they seem to possess a strange power that can turn ordinary people into their offspring. So you'd better be careful. Although I think your suit is pretty good at defense, if you really get scratched, you'll turn into a rat too." Chapter 120 Spiders and Bats, Part 2. Peter's smugness didn't last long, because he found himself in big trouble. Since then, his name seems to have spread throughout the vampire community, and everyone knows that there is a man named Spider-Man who wants to fight against all the vampires in the world single-handedly. Peter had no idea who had spread such a great reputation about him. He had only wanted to take down a small vampire stronghold single-handedly, and he had already succeeded. His next plan was to take down another, slightly larger stronghold, but now, it's like he's stirred up a horde of rats. Whenever he appears in New York as Spider-Man, a swarm of giant bats will chase and bite him. Peter flew between the buildings in Brooklyn, followed by 2 or 3 bats. But Peter was perfectly clear-headed. He made a sharp turn in the air, rounding the corner of a building, causing the lead bat to crash into the corner of the wall. Then he released the web and plummeted downwards, with the other bats following him. When they were less than 2 meters from the ground, Spider-Man shot out a web and swung up again, while the bats behind him, unable to break in time, crashed to the ground. Peter found that he had really changed a lot. He was now full of tactical plans. The terrain of half of Brooklyn was presented in his mind, with its ups and downs. He could clearly see where he could shake off his pursuers and where he could hide. Although he used to wander around this neighborhood often, he would forget the layout as soon as he saw it. But when he needed it, the layout would reappear. This feeling fascinated Spider-Man and made him feel like he had everything under control. Using a similar tactic, he shook off 2 bats and landed on the building. Suddenly, a cloud of black mist appeared behind him, and a sharp claw attacked him. Spider senses reacted, and Peter rolled away to dodge. He then knelt on the ground, staring intently at the cloud of black mist. The black mist condensed into a figure. A white-haired man dressed in medieval attire appeared before Spider-Man. Like other vampires, he was pale and had a gloomy expression, but he appeared more arrogant. He said, "Spider-Man, is it you who wants to be an enemy of the great vampire clan? Vampires? You're nothing but a bunch of winged rats." Spider-Man slowly stood up, noticing his voice was deeper than the other man's. "You don't actually think the leader of the rats is any more noble than the others, do you?" This angered the other party, and the white-haired vampire immediately transformed into a cloud of black mist, instantly appearing in front of Spider-Man. Peter's spider sense activated again, and he rolled away once more. A spider web shot out onto the boxes piled on the roof, sending a bunch of boxes flying. The cloud of black mist had to transform into human form and use its arms to block the attack. In that instant, Spider-Man vanished. Spider-Man, dangling in midair, muttered to himself, "What did I just say to him? That was way too harsh." He touched his face and said, "Is this really me? Would I say such things?" Spider-Man is a chatterbox, but he mostly uses trash talk to distract his opponents and rarely gets so hurtful. Peter Parker isn't really good at swearing, and even when he distracts his opponents, it's always with a joking tone. But Peter found it a bit unbelievable, yet also quite satisfying, that the high-ranking vampire was almost driven mad by him. He thought what he just said was brilliant. So what if you have magic? Aren't you still just a winged mouse? Upon returning to Queens, Peter noticed flames flickering on a street in the center. He quickly swam over and found that it was a street not far from Midtown High School, where chaos reigned as police were fighting vampires. Spider-Man cursed under his breath, realizing he had fallen into a trap. No wonder the giant bats chasing him had been pushing him out of Queens. Luckily, he had kept a clear head and hadn't gotten too entangled with that high-ranking vampire, or they would have succeeded. Peter was about to go down to help when he saw Gwen and her father George near the firefight zone. George was using his arm to shield Gwen. As the police firing slowed down and many high-ranking vampires suppressed the fighting, the place where the father and daughter were standing began to become increasingly dangerous. Peter was very anxious and wanted to go down to save the person, but the high-ranking vampire he had previously interfered with caught up with him. These vampires are different from ordinary vampires. They can use teleportation and magic that extends claws from the black mist. Teleportation doesn't pose much of a threat to Peter, since he has a spider sense. Once the other party gets close, Peter's spider sense will warn him, and then he can dodge. However, the magical skill that extended claws from the black mist caused Peter considerable trouble. Spider-Man mainly relies on his webs to move in midair. The The high-level vampire wasn't stupid either. Seeing this, he directly aimed his magic at Peter's webs. Every time Peter tried to swing over, his webs were cut by the claw magic, forcing him to quickly change direction. Under this interference, Peter couldn't rush to save his girlfriend and her father immediately. As the line of fire pushed further back, the people on the ground were almost at their last chance to retreat. Behind them was the school district. Peter knew George's personality. He would never allow these monsters to storm the school. Peter was frantic with worry and regret for not increasing the strength of his spider silk. As several vampires surrounded George and Gwen, Peter's anxiety and anger almost consumed him. As the spider silk was cut again, Peter felt something surging in his arm. Driven by instinct, Peter shot out a web once more. This time, the web was no longer white, but black slime. Once the black spider silk adhered to the wall, it seemed to come alive when faced with the magical claws. As soon as it was cut, more slime would surge up until the silk became so tough that the magical claws could not cut it. Peter quickly arrived at the scene of the firefight, used black spider silk to stick a car to him, and swung it hard, sending the vampires that the police were pressing towards flying and crashing into the wall. All the police officers and George and his daughter were stunned. Enraged, Spider-Man picked up a lamppost. Seeing the danger, the vampires behind him tried to turn into bats and escape, but Spider-Man swung the lamppost, knocking them all down one by one. After the initial shock, the police officers recovered and rushed forward to finish them off. After venting his frustrations, Peter turned around and saw that George and Gwen were out of danger. He really wanted to go and check on them, but in the end, he hesitated and instead launched his webs away. Once he calmed down, he realized what had happened and looked at his arm in surprise, but there was nothing unusual there. Peter muttered to himself, "What happened? What was that black spider silk just now?" He fiddled with his wrist and removed the miniature spider silk emitter from his suit. He opened the box inside and found that the raw materials had not changed. He tried again and the emitted silk was still white. This sparked Peter's intense curiosity. Could it be that he had unlocked some new talent? This led him to start trying to launch spider silk using various movements. To outsiders, he looks like a weirdo in a tight-fitting suit, making all sorts of silly and ridiculous gestures on the rooftop, which is quite comical. After struggling for a long time, Peter was exhausted, but he still couldn't successfully shoot out those black spider silks again. Peter thought his posture might be wrong, and just as he was about to try doing a handstand, a voice finally snapped in his head. "Don't even try! Are you an idiot?" Peter was startled. He almost jumped up, then looked left and right and said, "What? Who are you? What are you talking to? I'm in your head. Didn't you even realize it?" Peter stared wide-eyed in shock and exclaimed, "In my head? Then who are you? My second personality? Do I have dissociative identity disorder? Oh my God, I have to see Dr. Schiller." "No, no, no. Don't go. You don't need to see a doctor. I'm not your personality." "Oh, damn it. Stop. Don't run that way." Peter hesitated for a moment, then stopped and asked, "Then who are you?" "I am an unlucky alien symbiote. My name is Venom. As for the rest, your brain may not be able to understand it. You just need to know that I am here to help you." "An alien symbiote? You're an alien? That's so cool. But why are you inside my body?" "Because you're a dim-witted coward. If I hadn't helped you just now, you would be dead." "How could you say that to me? Even without you, I would have found a way. You don't actually think that all these recent methods were your own ideas, do you? Isn't that so?" Peter then realized that he seemed to be a little different lately. No matter what he did, he would start to consider the plan first. Sometimes, making a plan was not enough, and he would prepare several contingency plans in his mind. Moreover, his ability to react on the spot and formulate tactical plans in times of crisis had suddenly improved by a lot. "So you did that?" Peter asked. "Are there really such amazing aliens? Not only can they live inside my body, but they can also help me find solutions?" "Wait, were you sighing just now? Why were you sighing? Although I'm not as smart as you, I'm not stupid either, am I? It shouldn't make you sigh, right? Forget about those irrelevant things. How do you plan to deal with these people chasing us?" Peter hesitated for a moment, then scratched his head and said, "Anyway, they usually can't catch me. I can shake them off in a few rounds." "Are you planning to spend every single day playing with them like this? Is that not allowed?" "I'm free anyway." "But I'm not free," Venom roared. "Hurry up and take care of them all. Then we'll go eat heads. There are so many of them. How am I supposed to handle this? Wait, what did you say you wanted to eat? Listen, you're the dumbest human I've ever met, bar none, Venom said. Now use your not-so-bright brain to come up with a way that's above average, and then wipe them all out in one fell swoop, and we can have a holiday. Do aliens need vacations too? Peter asked. Why do you seem so anxious? Do you have some business goal? Venom seemed somewhat agitated. He said, or rather, why are you so careless? You have plenty of time to devise a foolproof plan to defeat all the enemies, so why are you just sitting here? Can we get moving? Find a room, think carefully, devise 200 battle plans, and then put them into practice immediately. Now, quickly. Peter's head was spinning. He said, can't you keep your voice down? You remind me of my homeroom teacher. Besides, I don't have final exams coming up. I just wanted to take care of the 2 strongholds in this neighborhood. Now that I've accomplished my goal, I'm even planning to go on a date with Gwen tomorrow.